Old man doing a podcast. Real weirdos. We have English degrees. Real weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. What up, my boyos?
What up? All right, hold on. I need to turn off the AC because it's picking up on the mic.
Okay, you do that. You turn off your air conditioning on this 95-degree day in Northern California. Actually, it's not too bad. It's like 85.
Really?
And it's cloudy because there's just so much smoke coming over the hills from Tahoe. I would assume.
Yeah, you guys are dealing with that smoke. See, there's nothing here in LA blocking the sun. It's just beating down on me relentlessly.
You were at a wedding for like 3 days in 105-degree heat in a suit.
Yeah, I was.
How was that? Jeff and I heard a little bit about it.
What wedding is 3 days?
Yeah, right?
Good ones, man.
Like fly down, see the dumb fucking ceremony, and fly away. I mean, what the fuck?
So I was in the wedding, so I had to do the rehearsal and the rehearsal dinner. But I'm with you, Jeff. Something is even for bachelor parties, why are they 5-day extravaganzas? I thought it was always supposed to be a night, right? And they're turning into these fucking giant
How do people have the fucking stamina?
I know.
I just how do you have the stamina to just drink and party for 5 days? Jesus Christ.
It's great. The best wedding I ever went to was out in the countryside outside of Berlin. And it was at this beautiful farmhouse. And we stayed there for 3 days and just had a beautiful time. It was fantastic. But yeah, I think most weddings, I'd be pretty over it after the ceremony. But I don't know. It depends on the clientele. Depends on the vibe, the general vibe.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't your golf course wedding. It was a bunch of rad people on a farm outside of Berlin. And it's just awesome food, just chilling. I met this awesome Finnish lady.
Nice.
Shout out to Anna. Ended up visiting her in Finland for a couple weeks later. Yeah, it was great. But it wasn't 105-degree heat in LA. It was in a farmhouse outside of Berlin.
So I was actually in Riverside County, which is, if you can imagine, just
even
slightly worse than LA. I'm a sweater, naturally. I just run hot. I think I'm sweating right now. I haven't checked my shirt, but I just sweat all the time. And it was not fun being in a suit. So, yeah, other than that, it was pretty uneventful.
Were you drunk the whole time?
Yeah.
I actually, I got a little too drunk, during the actual ceremony. We kept doing, toasts to the groom right before. And, I was a little forgetful when I was up in front of everyone. I don't remember too much what happened. And then I had to leave during one of the speeches because I needed to the movie thing where the main character goes into the bathroom, locks the door, splashes water on his face,
cries,
and then just looks at himself in the mirror for a second. I actually had to do that. I had to pull one of those. And
that's because you're the main character, man. You don't know it. Or maybe you do.
Hard protagonist energy.
The protagonist. The real protagonist.
What if Alex was the protagonist to life? Of all of this reality, all of everything that exists, Alex was the protagonist, and we were everybody's a side character.
You have Shakespeare.
There are so many people out there who think that they're the protagonist in this world, and it's no. You don't even understand. None of us are the protagonist. We're just these, I'm the most side of side characters. I learned this long ago.
I'm the character in the RPG that glitches out in the corner and then gets hit by a car and then its foot goes rubber bands and I nothing works. That's the character I am. The one who's clipped into the ground with his waist in and just walking around trying to give you quests. That's me, just fucked and still trying to do my job.
I could see whole Reddit forums dedicated to figuring out the Jeff bug in video games.
That's me.
What I'd be some guy you'd meet for a night who just tells you a cool tale and then you never think about him again. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I don't know what you guys are talking about because I am 100% the main character.
Well, yeah, that's what we're saying.
That's what we're saying.
That's what we're saying. You're not a very smart main character, apparently.
Yeah. I watched enough anime.
Got a low
intelligence
score.
Character.
You put everything into charisma.
So we're talking about the Green Knight eventually. We saw it.
We're talking about the Jolly Green Giant.
But I have a few book reports to make first.
Oh, Dad.
I was gonna fold them in later, the recommendations, but whatever. Let's do them now.
Okay.
Let's do
one
them.
of them is like clearing the air a little bit. I kind of made fun of Zombieland a few weeks ago. I said I don't remember it being very good. And so Adam was like, you should see it again. It's great. It's almost as good as Shaun of the Dead. And I was like, okay. Challenge accepted, because I fucking love Shaun of the Dead. That movie's brilliant.
Oh, that's zombie perfection.
And so I watched it, and it's not bad. Zombieland is not bad. It's kind of hollow fluff. It had made me chuckle a few times. I loved it when Bill Murray showed up as a zombie. That was fun. But other than that, it was fun. I would not in any way say that it's as good as Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah,
there's no fucking way.
Yeah, you can't.
No.
Like, they're not even comparable. Like, Shaun of the Dead is a perfect zombie movie.
Shaun of the Dead has an amazing style. Like, it's really good filmmaking. It has a lot of heart. It has like genuine humanity and like brotherhood elements to it. Whereas Zombieland is like just a fun ride with some fun lines and some kind of fun characters. One of the things that bugged me when I was watching it, and I know it's a comedy, blah, 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 but I was like, so it's far enough into the zombie apocalypse where almost nobody's left, but the electricity is still on. That's weird. And then like the climax takes place at this amusement park, and the characters are so dumb that they think that turning on this entire amusement park is not going to attract like a zombie apocalypse onto them, which of course it does. And there are these moments where the girls go up to like, I don't know how well you guys remember this movie, but they go to like the rides and they're just like in a ride and it's like moving. And then in another shot, they'll be off the ride. And I'm like, who's operating these rides? Like I've been to these carnivals before. I know you can't stop and start the ride from inside the ride.
I think it's probably like an idea of like it's on just like a timer, you know, it just like does one revolution and then stops. You know,
maybe.
I mean, when I watch Zombieland, the intricacies of the amusement park power system were definitely not in the forefront of my mind. But I mean, it's a solid point.
I was also thinking about it in script writing terms, right? Because it starts off with all of these rules. Jesse Eisenberg has all of these rules and how to survive a zombie apocalypse. And I was like, okay, the movie is going to use those in a really clever way as its finish, you know, where it's like, oh, he has to use all these different rules and the new rules that he picked up along the way in order to do this complex, cool thing. But none of that happens. And I was like, oh, I guess those rules are just kind of there.
No, you're just there because it's like fun to have zombie rules.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my book report. It was fun. I definitely think it's not a bad movie. But Shaun of the Dead level, no, my son. No. No. It's a decent piece of candy.
Yeah, definitely.
My other book report.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, because we've been talking about Guy Ritchie, and I started my Odyssey. So
I'm excited about
this.
I'm
gonna try to have one of these every episode or every couple episodes, depending on how close together we film them. Film them? Record them?
Yep,
that's
there
the
you
word.
go.
There you go. I got there eventually, old man brain. So I watched Guy Ritchie's 2005 film, Revolver, the one he did after Snatch. Well, after Swept Away, specifically, but I'm not watching that shit. I'm not watching a romance movie starring Madonna. So Revolver is one of the worst fucking movies I've ever seen.
I'm so happy you think this.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you think this.
I mean, do you agree, Jeff?
Oh, it's the worst Guy Ritchie movie by far. I mean, I'm sure Swept Away is better, but
Okay.
I don't think it's the worst movie. No. In the Name of the King is the worst movie ever. But
they're both part of the Jason Statham and Ray Liotta cinematic universe.
That's true.
Jesus.
That's true.
And Ray Liotta is just as bad, if not worse, in Revolver.
Oh God, he's
as
terrible.
He is in The Name of the King. He's fucking terrible. The whole movie is terrible. It made me so angry. It has a level of conceit in the way that it thinks it's being like intelligent and witty, and I don't know, it all completely fell flat. I didn't care about anything. The movie was garish and hideous, badly filmed. It's possibly some of the worst editing I've ever seen. He couldn't even work the focus on the camera. It's just like this shallow focus that was nauseating. The color palette made me feel sick. And the script made me want to murder the movie.
Yeah, it was Guy Ritchie. It was Guy Ritchie doing his absolute worst Guy Ritchie impression.
Yeah, it's weird. You can kind of tell that it's his style, but it's like devoid of any character or substance or anything interesting. It just made me angry.
Yeah, it's a flop for sure as far as his film art. But it's what's funny and interesting about that film is that then it's followed by Rock and Rolla, which is such like a charming, like almost like funny ensemble movie, like kind of like what he's famous for. But I don't know, it's such a better film than Revolver, and it's such a good film to then all of a sudden follow Revolver. I don't know, it makes me so interested in the production of Revolver, because it's like how does a director miss that bad and then go right away and make something pretty decent right afterwards? Like, I just in his own style. Like, directors do that all the time, but within their own style is so strange to me.
Have you seen this movie, Alex?
Rock and Rolla?
Yeah. No. Revolver. We're not.
No.
Yeah.
No,
okay. No, you have not. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I finished it, and like I'm willing to give Guy Ritchie the benefit of the doubt. I fucking love Snatch and Lock, Stock, and I was like, I had no, illusions going in. I'd heard it wasn't great, but I was not prepared for a movie that I put on the level of like some of the worst things I've ever seen. It's like in my mental checklist with things like Funny Games, Transformers movies, The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I like how you had to make a point to say all the Transformers movies. Like, you started with the Transformers, and then you were like, movies must be clear. The whole cinematic universe is dog shit.
To be fair, I've only seen the first two. I was done after that.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Just like, I got to make sure I go back. It wouldn't be Jesse if I didn't make sure that you knew that all the Transformers is terrible.
That's true. I want you to see, I don't know if you've noticed in this podcast yet, but I'm very interested in making sure you know what my opinions are about movies. It's so weird.
That's why we're here. Almost.
I know.
It's almost like we decided to do this.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm really, really passionate about it and vaguely knowledgeable.
Didn't you have one more?
Yeah, but I'm going to save it for the end because that's a legit recommendation.
Oh, it's a legit recommendation, folks. You heard it here first.
That's right.
Jesus Christ. Let's talk about The Green Knight.
We're talking about The Green Knight. So, little preface, we did make fun of A24 a few weeks ago for releasing this movie in a way that we found kind of scummy.
I don't know about make fun. I kind of crucified them a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, you can watch this movie for one night only on stream at a specific time for $20. And we were like, okay, snack on our balls, A24. But that is nothing against the film or the filmmaker. That is not their decision. And I do like David Lowery as a filmmaker, and he seems like a really interesting dude. So I was very interested to see this movie, as all three of us were. So we're still going to cover it because it seemed awesome.
It'd be so great if we didn't. If like this whole preamble was just like, so we're not going to cover it.
Yeah.
Psych! And then
still
such a dick
still
move.
The name of the episode.
Still title it Green Knight.
We just like preamble for like 30 more minutes. Like, The Green Knight. Oh yeah, it was shit.
And then just
later. See you next week. But what I want to do is get some general thoughts and then talk about a few things before we get to what this movie is about.
Sure.
That's a big fucking question.
This is a dense monster.
Generally speaking, Alex, my boy, how did you feel about The Green Knight?
Wow. This movie was I don't know. This movie is like what Jeff just said, a dense like monster. It is I don't know if it was my own expectations of it, but I thought it was really good. I thought it was, I don't know, it's the first film I think I've seen of the director, and I thought it was amazing.
Same.
So Jeff, you loved it as well?
I don't know if I loved this movie. I'm still unsure.
Yeah, I don't want to put those words.
I'm still on the fence about whether I even like this movie.
Okay.
This movie is really well told and absolutely gorgeous. I will say that the story has something to be desired as far as the story beats, and how you tell a tale like this really is more what I want to talk about, is like how you tell a tale like The Green Knight and do it justice in the form of a film. That's the crux, because you're taking something that is not ever meant for film. You're taking a poem written over 1,000 years ago and turning it into a story, and it's into a film, and it's very difficult.
It is. It's a difficult film, and that's something I want to touch on before we get too far past the introduction. I will say I loved this movie. I watched it twice. It's up there next to Pig as my favorite movie of the year. But I do agree that after the first viewing, I could almost sum up my thoughts about it in like just noises. I was like,
yeah.
And then at the end, I'm like, huh. Yeah. I don't really know.
It's just all contemplative onomatopoeias.
It took a lot of thought. Talking about Pig, I think is a good way to start off, because that's a movie where if you're expecting a certain thing based on the trailer or the material that's presented to you before you actually see the movie, you could very much think it's a certain type of film and be disappointed when you see that it's not. And this is very similar. Like Pig, if you think that Pig is going to be like a John Wick style revenge movie, you're going to be disappointed, probably, if you're expecting that and that's what you want out of it. Similarly, if you want The Green Knight to be like an easily digestible, fun, cohesive adventure movie, fantasy adventure movie, along the lines of like Willow or Lord of the Rings or something, like where the meanings are very like obvious in a sense, then this movie is not going to be for you. Spelled out is a great way of saying it. Thank you, my friend. Because this movie requires you to do work. It requires you to do a lot of mental work in order to glean what's interesting about it. And I think that that's why it's had a lot of the the great critical reception, but sort of a lower audience thing. But this is a movie that's, I feel like, totally made for me. Not only have I studied this story in college and written a thing about it, an essay it's called. There we go. Brain catching up to
I wrote a sentence
I was like,
about
wow,
it.
I was like, what did he write about it? Some kind of like opinion piece or like something special, I
wrote a poem.
I wrote an essay.
Yeah, I wrote an essay. That's what it's called. And I love obtuse movies that are also really smart, and which I think this one is.
I'd agree.
I know some people might disagree, but I like an obtuse movie where there's so much symbolism and metaphor and just things. There's so many things that like are going on within it that every time you rewatch it or you think about it in a different sort of lateral sense, you can tease more out of it. It's almost like reading a really dense and good narrative that grabs you. And as English majors, like we've done this. You know, this is like one of the things that we are trained to do is look at a really dense narrative or a text, whatever the text may be, whether that's a film or a book or whatever, and see all the interesting like things going on in it. And that's why this movie is astonishing to me. And really it's beautiful as well. We could talk about that. This movie's made for $15 million.
Jesus Christ.
That's like a quarter of the budget of like an Adam Sandler
That's
comedy.
the cost of the costume that the Green Knight is in. Like that, I mean, just alone the practical effects put into that costume that Ralph Ineson is wearing is there's the $15 million.
Badass. It's a cool costume.
It's absolutely breathtaking.
It's one of the best looking movies I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, I feel like my opinion of this movie is going to formulate live during this podcast.
I would love it for that too, because I have a lot of notes about what I think is going on in this film.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to get like a general what I think about it and who should watch it sort of thing, and then talk about how beautiful the visuals and the sound are before we get into...
thank you, Jesse. I was like, we have to talk about the soundtrack to this movie before we can even get into it.
Please, yeah. I've been talking for ages now. Take the load off,
man.
my friend.
Okay, so all right, so A24, regardless of what we said about them, this is the first A24 movie that I have seen that has not been directed by Ari Aster. So it's a little bit of a deviation from that style that I was attributing to this studio for a while. I was almost giving A24 the reputation of like a game studio would have, where like they hold the artistic integrity of the film on their shoulders instead of the director, like it is with film. And I pulled myself away from that mentality during this watching. But what I did find is that A24, I do feel like they are a little bit like that. They do have a vibe and an influence into the film's creation that goes beyond the director. Because they just, with The Witch, with Midsummer, the sound design, the minimalist sound design is so unbelievably breathtaking. The fact that, and The Green Knight specifically, is very little music. It's all these like beautiful droning strings and long held notes of like pianos and lots of string instruments and brass and wind instruments just being like stretched until they're almost breaking the notes. They're vibrating and resonating on such a level, and it adds this like this monumental earthquake type feel to the movie where the scenes of him just like walking through an open field have this gravity and this depth to them, and it's all because of this just brilliant sound design in this movie. And
the editing. The editing of the movie is phenomenal.
And the cinematography, it's just amazing, the cinematography. And this movie looks and sounds incredible. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, Alex, come on. Jump in here.
You guys have both just been like gushing about it. I've just been listening. I that's the thing though, is I agree with
You're like, what am I going to say?
Almost everything you guys have said.
What were moments in the movie where the sound really contributed to your involvement, your investment in the plot?
Oh, like from the get-go.
Yeah. Okay.
The entire like you said, the like dissonant soundtrack thing is almost a trademark of A24, and it's also, I think, it was made popular, if we go way back for a second, or not way back, but by There Will Be Blood and Johnny Greenwood's score, where he started to like, it was like, okay, the score is not pretty. You go look at the Oscar or the Academy Award winning scores from like the 90s. It's like people like Thomas Newman and fucking Rachel Porter.
Well, even today you have the guy who does all the Interstellar stuff.
Hans Zimmer,
like he's the big guy right now, and he's still doing a very musical style.
Exactly. And he even has taken on like a darker like soundtrack role rather than something like he did for Pirates of the Caribbean or like The Rock, right? Like it's a totally different atmosphere and like world now. And no, this movie though, beyond the music, I had to play with the volume setting a lot, which wasn't like a bad experience, only because there were things that I was like, I could hear a little bit and be like, wait, I want like it to be really loud. So at one point I just switched to watching this movie with headphones on. And it's like, almost Lynchian. People say that a lot, but I don't mean it in like, oh, it's weird and quirky. I mean it in that David Lynch is also obsessed with sound, whether it's mundane sound or like actually important dialogue or sound like that. He plays with all different levels of like, I don't know.
Yeah, just
sound.
With just using the music to represent the feelings of the character in the moment, or the feelings of the atmosphere, or what's going on. This is a very quiet movie when it's not loud, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of whispering and harsh tones and a lot of like low, gravelly whispering. And I watched this movie the second time with subtitles, and I found it to be much more... I got a much more well-rounded experience, because I found in the first watch I was kind of... the scene, like, where the fox was talking, I was like, huh, what is he saying? Like, I kind of had to like rewind it and like listen to it a few times, because it was just so gravelly and low. And but that adds, it's all intentional. It's not, I'm not complaining about this. It's like when someone whispers in order to make you lean in to listen more. That's what this movie does with its score. It gives you just enough to where you start to lean in. Like, I was so skeptical when I first started watching this movie. I was like, okay, we'll see. High fantasy, we'll see. Mm-hmm. And I laughed at one point because I recognized my body language. I was sitting watching the movie low in with my hand on my chin and the other hand over my mouth.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just, that was my like body language the whole movie. And I'm like, and I only realized it about halfway through, and I just started laughing at myself. And I was like, well, yep, I guess you're into it, Jeff. Like, I remember saying that out loud to myself. But Jesse, is there anything as far as the score that like any kind of particular scene?
I don't know.
Or just particular like chapter, really?
I have the one where, I mean, I don't want to like dive too early into the plot, but the moment where he's tied up?
Yes.
And like the camera is like panning around in a circle in the forest.
Amazing scene.
From his
beautiful shot. I have other things to say about that shot.
Yeah. And then
we're going to have a lot to say about every scene in this movie.
Then you see the skeleton, and then it goes back, That whole scene, the music and the sound in that scene, like I think you can hear the forest still through the music, and it's like, I don't know. That scene was intense.
Yes.
It's a very natural soundtrack, and that ties into the themes of the movie, which are about death and nature. I mean, even the very first shot, unless you guys want to keep talking about the score.
No, please. I mean, let's get into it.
This first shot, I was watching this earlier today, and I was like, okay, the first shot of a movie or the first page of a book means something, like what's the first sentence? What's the first shot? And so it has this little barnyard, and it has animals for nature, a building burning in the background to represent some sort of chaos. And I didn't even notice this the first time, but there's a dude sleeping in the barnyard in the lower left of the frame. And so there's like humanity in there. So you have all these elements in there.
Well, the animals picking at each other, like the geese. Yeah. I loved that this movie started out with a goose being a dick. Just like, I don't know, there was something about that was so like real to the real world. It's like, yep, goose being a dick to the goat.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess a good way to frame this is like to ask you guys broadly, and there's no like one answer here, which is part of why this movie is so great. Like, what is this movie about? That's my question to you.
This movie is about the tenets and virtues that create a good man and a good knight. That chivalry at this point that the movie is... Now, of course, as anyone knows, Arthurian myths are myths. They're not true. Arthur didn't exist. So and so and for, and maybe a version of a person like him existed, but he was not real. So in the Arthurian myths, one, you always have a very young Arthur, but you also have this high view of chivalry, knighthood at its highest degree. The pinnacle of what it means to be a good man is to be a knight. It's what everyone wants to be. And that had corroded throughout the end of the medieval era, around the end of this era, the ideology of chivalry had corroded to the point where now being a knight was just about being in a position of power, being a higher caste than your fellow man. And so this movie is saying two things. It's saying, what does it mean to be a knight? What are the 5 virtues of being a knight? Mm-hmm. And can chivalry exist in a world that is corroding?
Okay. I have many notes on this, but first, Alex?
We're talking about the... You're asking me,
I'm just asking you what would you say this movie was about to you? Or is that too big a question?
No, I think it's important, the little exchange that he has with his uncle about not being able to tell a story.
I don't have any stories yet.
Yet.
And exactly. I feel like it could be boiled down to something very simple, as in this is how you think life is going to be, and you're going to come out with your nice clean armor, and you're going to be a knight, you're going to be at all the fancy dinners and everything like that. But it's actually kind of shitty. Life is not actually that gold and gleaming to begin with. But that's super basic.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted. I just wanted a sort of broad thing before we deep dive. So one of the things you mentioned there, Jeff, was the 5 knightly virtues. And I had to do a little, like I said to you guys, I read the story again after I watched the movie because I wanted to have a broader perspective on it. And it's kind of an inverse of the tale. In the book, Gawain is a virtuous knight who's won many battles. And he goes through and embodies the 5 knightly virtues, which is a big theme of both stories. But he embodies them to a T until the very end with Fellowship, when he doesn't give Lord Bertilac the green sash. But in the film version, Gawain is a fucking awful knight. And this is the interesting inversion, is he fails. He fails in all the knightly virtues until the end.
He's not a knight. He's not a knight. Nephew.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing.
But he's trying to be a knight. He wants to be a knight.
In the way that a child wants to be a knight.
Right. But he's also failing. So he fails in generosity when he gives the kid a single coin for helping him out. He fails in courtesy when he tries to touch Winifred, and she says a knight should know better. And then extra fails when he asks her what kind of a reward he'll get for helping, instead of just being a knight and helping. He fails fucking very obviously when he cheats on Essel with Lady Bertilac. He first claims that the token Essel gave him was nothing to do with love. And then in that hilariously erotic scene...
props to the prop department. Because that is the most realistic movie semen I've ever seen.
They just had a guy.
That was some legitimately high quality movie semen.
Yeah. Oh, Alex, do you want to describe this scene? We had you describe a similar scene starring Philip Seymour Hoffman in another episode.
Oh God, no. I'm good. You can take this one.
Well, she basically jerks him off, and you can see the cum going into the sash in a really nice, sexy, very appetizing shot.
Yeah, it doesn't hold on it long.
No,
but it holds on it long enough
to scar my brain.
Yeah,
but yeah,
it's
dude,
whoa, okay.
He fails in Fellowship when he doesn't give Lord Bertilac the green sash, because at their idea or their game is to, I'll give you what I get from the forest, and you give me whatever you get at home. So he fails that. The only moment, it's an interesting turn on the hero's journey, right? Because Gawain fails every task that's emblematic of the knightly virtues. He's a failure throughout the film. And I have in my notes, he's a bad knight. You're right, he's not a knight yet. But at that final moment, that's piety is the last one. That wins out. Because we get that montage where he sees what a life without honor would be in that extended montage.
A life with false honor.
Yeah, he decides to die to be honorably. And in this moment, I think you could say that he becomes a knight.
Well,
I don't know.
I wouldn't say he
think.
Becomes a knight. I would say that he finally understands what the knightly virtues mean. Because through that vision, he loses all 5 of the knightly virtues. He loses all of his friends when he becomes king. There's no sense of generosity. He lives in a very hollow kingdom full of war. Chastity, I didn't really see that. It just seems like he's just, he betrays Essel and takes her child.
Well, that's big. that qualifies, I think.
Courtesy, piety. He fails all of these things in his vision of this life as the king. And I think it's more like my biggest problem with this movie the whole time was the main character, was Gawain.
His character or the acting?
The character.
Okay.
The way that they portrayed him in this movie. And it's not a huge problem. It's just, I felt he was very naive, and I get that played into the story that that David Lowery's trying to tell with this version of Gawain, but I don't know, he just had this like when he's getting taken advantage of in the forest. I had a part of me that wanted him to like be a badass, you know what I mean? And the fact that he just gets everything taken from him and lays in the forest is good for the story, but I just was like, oh man, I just want one point this guy to be a knight.
Yeah,
I guess.
It's not your typical narrative at all.
Like, I want him to be virtuous. I want him to do that.
The movie is really not telling you what's going on as well. Like he'll meet people, and even though things have been taken away from him, they'll just somehow appear again. Like, there's so many little things that don't precisely make sense, but you can kind of make sense. I think will frustrate a certain audience. But for people like us, it's like amazing. You're like, yes, more things that I can think about that have answers. You just have to find them.
Watching this movie is a lot like close reading a poem. You know, it's which is essentially what we're doing here. I mean, it's a movie based on a poem, but that's
what I was saying earlier.
This is like close reading a poem. Like, every scene, when you're close reading a poem, you have to look at every line in a vacuum. You can't think about the line that came before it or the line after it to give context. It has to be, every line is in a vacuum. And that's almost how you have to take each chapter. You know, the idea of close reading, of looking at each scene and seeing what the true meaning behind those words are beyond the greater context of the poem. And I think that's something that's so important to when watching this movie, because this movie it's hard to tell a story like this in film. This film would be like if you tried to do the Homeric hymns. It's hard to tell those stories in a visual medium because they're built for an oral medium. And
I agree.
There are times where the story doesn't flow as well as I would have wanted it to, or maybe like the transitions between, sometimes the chapters felt very like the chapter The Journey, where between leaving the castle and finding the kid in the battlefield. That's one chapter called The Journey, and it's basically one long reverse take of him walking his horse away from the castle, and that's the chapter. And at that point I'm like, why does that title card even need to be in here? Those were my type of complaints with the movie. It had nothing really to do with structure or form. It was more like how David Lowery decided to rewrite the story for the screen, because that's what he did. He rewrote the entire play for cinema.
There's a nice little nod to that when he's in the castle towards the end, and she's like showing him all his books, and she's like, yeah, sometimes I even I have all these books of people, like people have told me these stories, and I copy them down, and sometimes when I see room for improvement, I just rewrite them or something like that.
And it's like, it's a little nod at like how these stories change over time, how oral narratives just take on new meaning and new. I mean, the Arthurian legends in general are an entire representation of that. There's 3 different stories about how Arthur became king, 2 different ones about how he got Excalibur, which is cool. This movie is great for Arthurian nerds because there's little things, and they never call the king King Arthur. They only call him King. The whole movie. He's even credited as the king. And
nobody has names except Arthur and Essel. Gawain and Essel.
Yep. And then like Arthur hands him Excalibur. And I don't know, for me, I had such like a, he gets to take Excalibur. Like, I had such an 8-year-old nerd moment where I was like, he's got Excalibur, dude. Like, it's so cool. Like, it's like, I don't know. But they never say it. They don't say Excalibur. They don't say the name. Like, it's not about that. These characters, Arthur is portrayed as like, at the end of his life, him and his wife are just sunken and disheveled for years of running a country. And it's like you see that in the dark circles around their eyes and the sunken in cheeks and the way Arthur has that rasp to him. Sean Harris again, by the way. Can we just talk about Macduff kills it again? Like, Jesus.
Yeah. Was he Macduff?
Yeah, it was the same actor as Macduff. Yeah. Oh, Sean Harris is the king. Yeah, he just had that low, gravelly Scottish tone.
Oh, he's great.
Oh, it's so good.
Alex, you've been almost entirely quiet.
No, I think I've just been talking too much.
No, I've been letting you guys roll on this movie. I mean, I'll just say, like, for me at least, I think the biggest plus for this movie is the way that it looks. And I think that the storytelling was actually, like, very solid. I honestly think that maybe Laurie got a little scared with, like, letting the audience, general audiences, like, be too confused. So maybe that's where the title card thing comes in.
Well, yeah, Jeff. There's also the huge exposition dump by Lady Bertolacchi, like, right midway.
I really liked that, though.
No, it was great. That, though. No, exposition dumps don't, like, there's a negative connotation to that phrase, exposition dump, because it's usually used in a way where it's like, here's all the info you need to know, and, like, there's no context. I don't know. There's just the exposition dump really is done well, is what I was trying to get at.
That's something I wanted to point out. And reading in talking about the differences between the film adaptation and the original poem, the role of women was super interesting. Because in the original, spoilers, this was written in the 6th fucking century or thereabouts. And like, oh, I should have had this. I should have written this down or like had this to point at. But essentially at the end, one of the major themes of the story is like, it's sad that we can't just love our women without succumbing to their treacherous minds and ways. And it's like, damn, okay. You're written in the 6th century, I guess. But in this movie, the role of women is very different. They seem to hold all the power and all the knowledge.
Well, I mean, he casted Dev Patel as Gawain. I think that's
what does that have to do with women?
It doesn't. It just has to do with how they're reorganizing and restructuring the story to create a better version of the narrative, or a different version of the narrative.
Very different one, for sure. But yeah, in the original story, Morgan. What's her name? The queen, the witch in the stories. Morgan.
Morgan Le Fay.
Is it just Morgan? I think it's just Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not Gawain's mother or anything like that. I don't think she has very much to do in the narrative at all. In this one, it's presented in a way where we are given to believe that she creates the Green Knight and creates this whole adventure. It's very actually like pretty solidly put to the viewer in this way. And there's like some weird mirroring going on with the women as well, because Alicia Vikander plays the prostitute that Gawain is in love with at the beginning, and she also plays Lady Bertilac.
Yeah. I mean,
and you're like, what the fuck is going on there?
It's love of the same face and different status.
Yeah, you have the old lady who is like some kind of witch, something going on with her that's mystical. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she wears the same kind of like eye sash that Gawain's mother does when she like first casts the spell that brings him off on this journey. Like, there are all these little things that I don't know exactly what to say about them, but I love that they're there because they're super interesting. You know what I mean?
In paganism, women hold such a higher regard. They're usually shamans, or like they lead the rituals and stuff like that. And in Christianity, it is men who lead those. So it's a juxtaposition between paganism and Christianity. She walks through her court of people, her circle, her round table, much like the king does, but he does it in a Christian world full of stone and wine and metal and glass. and she does it full of nature and grass and teeth and bone, and it's it's this juxtaposition of paganism and Christianity.
I would say, yeah, like, but in Christian culture and in Christian stories, it is still like very common for women to be like witches,
of course,
right? Like, they might not perform the rituals. They don't perform them in like the sanctity of the church or at the pulpit or anything like that, but they are like the ones who...
But witches in a purely negative sense.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, there's no like exaltation in that.
Yeah. But the bones and like the more natural thing, definitely. And it reminded me just a little bit of like the shaman practices in
Midsummer?
Wow, the Korean movie we watched.
Which one?
Oh, I can't believe
Which one?
Wailing. The Wailing.
The Wailing?
The Wailing, exactly.
We need to do an episode on that someday, by the way. It's so good. That was our first. That was the first time we three got together and chatted about a movie, and I think we talked about it for like 3 hours.
Yep.
Yeah.
Among other things.
But like the feathers and the crow beaks and all that shit.
That grounded, naturalistic feel that comes with that type of practice and worship. Whereas in Christianity, it has this disconnect. I never see God. I have to take all these preachers and faiths and words that God is real and he cares for me. Whereas in these women have it right in front of their face. What I'm doing is real.
And you guys are honing in on another thing I want to talk about, which is just the theme of nature, which is strong in here, of course. But we haven't really touched on it too much. But Jeff, you were talking about the exposition dump, and that whole thing by Alicia Vikander, who, by the way, owns this movie whenever she's on screen. She's fantastic. Is about the nature of life and death and nature and how it works. Like when you die, the moss will cover your stones and all this stuff. And this is presented in really cool visual ways throughout the movie. Like people are often very small in the frame of the camera and are just surrounded by glorious, beautiful, misty nature. There's this moment that you talked about earlier where he's on the ground and he's tied up after the kid takes his stuff. And the camera pans right. And this is just what I got out of this. I don't know if this is like too much, but I was thinking about it in terms of like, okay, this is like the dawning of Western storytelling, Christianity. And that's like right to left is how we sort of translate that in terms of like how we tell a story in chronology. In Japanese, it's different, but it's left to right. So the camera pans right all the way around. And to me, it was going like forward in time. And we pan all the way around and then we see his dead body. He's just a skull with like a weevil. And then the camera sits there for a moment and then slowly goes back. You just see the woods. You hear this amazing soundtrack in the background. And it goes left. So it's like turning back the clock. And then we get back to Gowan and he's back to life. And I thought that was fantastic. And there are so many little life-death visuals like that. Like when Winterfridge's head changes from skull to skin and back again. Yeah. Or Gowan's skin turning to moss when he eats the poison mushrooms.
Did anyone read the story of Saint Winifred? Are you guys familiar with that story?
No.
It adds a lot of really great context to that scene.
Tell us, Jeff.
So the story of Saint Winifred is very simple. She was a woman who was promised to a man, but she decided, and I'm telling a very abridged version, of course.
That's okay. Probably good.
I don't want to go into the whole poem. But essentially, she was a woman who was promised to a man. She was the daughter of a great Welsh lord. So she was obviously promised. She was a bargaining tool, and she wanted to be a nun. And she decided to become a nun. And enraged by her decision, her husband-to-be cuts her head off and tosses it away. And in the place that her head rests, a well appears, a spring. And she's then brought back to life. So a knight grabs the head from inside, much like Gawain did, brings it to her, reunites her with her head, and it brings her back to life. And then she sees the knight who killed her, like leaning up like smugly against his sword. And the knight who saved her kills him and then leaves the kingdom, and she kind of becomes this like legendary figure. And it's believed that if you go and sit at the stone that he like puts the skull on when he climbs out, that stone is actually a monument. And if you sit upon that stone and you are pure of heart and you ask the well to protect you, it's guaranteed that you will receive the blessing of God. Like God will impart his blessing and his protection on you. So they flipped it on its head, where they took that story and they completely reversed it, where you have a woman looking for her head, and the knight that's supposed to reunite it is not the gallant knight that...
No, he kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's this person who is exactly the opposite. And so it's kind of like...
He's like, what do I get out of it? She's like, why would you even ask me that?
He's not given God's protection from the well and of St. Winifred because he does that, because the way he behaves in front of that well, God pushes him aside.
See, at that point, I saw it as failure, but more as like, okay, you're really young and like you don't understand the codes of chivalry and things like that. Like you would never even utter something like that.
But he should. He's like he's like 25 and he's been in the court for a long time. Like the whole point is that he should be better. Everything about he's Arthur's nephew. Like he only has the ability to just take that step towards greatness. And everyone is trying to push him to the point where his mother creates an entire fantastic game just so her son can understand the knightly virtues and take himself away from this brothel slumming, lying. He lies to his mother right away, which is like unbelievably unchristian to do.
It's not very knightly.
Yeah, I mean, he lies to his mother. He walks in, she's like, "Where have you been?" "I was at mass."
Lies. Oh, yeah, he's at church.
And then she's like, "Yeah, I bet you were. It sounds like you were drinking the entire sacrament." And I love
like
that
the
line.
sacrament.
Yeah, and it's such a funny line and such like a good point that he's going to brothels, lying to his mother. He doesn't want to marry Essel purely because of status.
Yeah, she's a hooker.
And he sees a better, higher status version of her, and that's who he wants.
Metaphor.
Yep, it's so metaphorical.
So metaphorical.
I have so many. I'm just trying to get I have so many notes.
Hey, Alex. What did you think of the Giants?
That actually was... I thought that part was going to throw me off because that part's big in the trailer. There's like a moment where like I didn't want it to get too like... How do I say this? Like too much of a novelty or like too fantasy. Like too juvenile to the point where it was going to be like, oh... we're like dancing around with like giants who have like special powers and shit like that. But their reaction or like the interaction between them and Gawain were like extremely human, I guess. You mentioned the humanity aspect at the beginning of this movie. And I feel like that's like a huge theme throughout, that we're just extremely frail, and they lead him to that castle, don't they?
No,
in a way,
it's a weird thing because he's like, "Can I get a ride?" And it tries to grab him or crush him. I'm not quite sure. And then the fox warns it away,
stands
like no. And then the giants sing for a moment, and then they just walk away. And then and then other stuff happens between that and him getting to the castle. Like he falls down, eats the mushroom, and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So he's tripping on mushrooms during this scene, I think is a nice context to put into this.
He may or may not be. Yeah, we're not sure. But I was like, okay, I looked into the symbolism of giants because this was one of the scenes where I was like, what in the hell did this mean? I have no idea. And I guess in mythology around this time, giants generally symbolized both nature and chaos. And so that's an interesting point. And I also thought like, okay, he's a bad knight. He wants to cheat. He wants to cheat by asking for a ride literally on the shoulders of giants. So I'm not exactly sure. I think I'm like somewhere in the right direction here.
I like that. That's a good read. I like that read a lot. Yeah. That's really cool. See, I saw that. So I saw that as he is beseeching a force that is beyond his understanding and attempting to corral it or ride upon it. He's attempting to control something that he has no understanding of. Because even when they try to speak with him, it's in this muffled, deep, guttural tone that he can't understand. And he doesn't understand when it tries to pick him up. He reacts negatively. When, in my looking at this, it seemed like it was a very like benign thing that the giant was doing. It wasn't like bringing a fist down or anything. It was like gingerly trying to pick him up.
It wasn't the giants in The Hobbit.
Yeah, I know. These are more like a traditional like Jotun giants, like from Viking mythology. Like these are like what the Jotun looked like. They were like these just naked humanoid forms.
But see, that's. I mean, I hate to keep saying this, but that's one of the cool things about this movie is like that's an equally valid, interpretation.
Yeah,
and that speaks to like the fact that scholars really debate a lot about what the original poem itself means. Like, we're really not sure. There's a lot of debate. And so, like, having a film that does that, well, that's can be very frustrating for a lot of people who expect it to be like a fantasy movie that holds your hand and is just a fun adventure. It is more like the poem. It's a literary text that has a lot of interpretations and weirdness that you as the viewer just aren't really quite sure what is going on.
There's a couple very particular moments I'd like to talk about, but Alex, I just really want to hear from you because originally, I mean, you were the one who recommended we watch this movie. I mean, really, you were the catalyst that drove this kind of interest. I had never even heard of The Green Knight. I've heard the story vaguely, but like I never even knew that they were making a movie. You
showed us the trailer. You're like, hey guys, check this shit out. We're like, yes.
I want to know what attracts you to the story of The Green Knight that made this movie interesting enough to recommend before it was even out.
Well, the biggest thing is just whenever a work like this, especially, in English, gets passed down through the years and it's anonymous, like the source is anonymous, that's always like intrigued me a little bit. I mean, this one I believe is lost due to like the failings of historical documentation and bookkeeping, right? Like shit just happens. It gets lost. But there's other books and stories that I've read that, like, there's one written by 4 or 5 different people called The Book of Unknowings, which was written by monks who all chose to remain anonymous. Yeah. And things like that have always interested me. And I wanted to know why now, of all times, with the way that movie audiences are, like, what drove this guy to make this film? And, like, why are you doing this story? So I decided, like, once I heard that this movie was getting made, I was like, okay, I have to see this. And then when I found out that A24 was, like, distributing it and everything, I was like, okay, cool. So it's just an interesting, like, it'd be like being like, oh, we're going to squeeze into this box office weekend in between, Free Guy and some other fucking movie.
Ride Along 4.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to put in a story that was written 1,000 years ago.
It's interesting you say that as well because, and this ties into audience expectation, like this is basically a really, really good-looking indie movie. It's like an indie art house movie that strangely got a cinematic release. Like I said, it's the quarter of a budget of an Adam Sandler movie and looks millions of times better. And it's like not really made for general audiences, which is probably why like people, man, I've seen some comments on the internet. Jesus Christ, I don't know why I decided to go into it.
Do that, dude.
It's like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. It's like, I say that a lot, but if you're saying that about The Green Knight, you should probably just stop watching movies. I don't know what to tell you.
My big one is nothing happened.
Yeah.
Or nothing happens. And I'm like, what?
Well, I mean,
what the fuck are you talking about?
God damn it. Here we go.
No, we don't need to get into this.
Hour.
We really don't.
I just want to get into a couple scenes that I thought were really important to the film that
move us past this. Yeah. Sure.
Yes.
My point, I had a point though. It just got sidetracked. Sorry. The point is like, like this is like basically a low budget movie, and to think about it as like, how did they make this now, or why? It's like, it's really not as big of a movie as it feels like it is.
Totally.
I mean,
it's
the
like
movie
Macbeth.
is what it is, but in terms of like what went into it, you have basically an indie filmmaker making an indie movie. It just looks fantastic. I'm not sure how they pulled this off for 15 million. But like David Lowery's last movie, I've talked about it before. It's called A Ghost Story. It's 90 minutes of Casey Affleck standing around in a robe, like in a ghost costume.
Yep.
And it's like, a general audience will think it is the most boringest thing they have ever seen. And all his movies have a better critical reception than they do an audience one, because they all have that kind of tone. You know, he did a really great movie called Ain't Them Bodies Saints, starring Casey Affleck and stuff like that. So he likes Casey Affleck, but that's my point, is like, this isn't like a Hobbit movie, you know? No. This is a small movie that garnered attention and got a theatrical release.
This movie is high fantasy done so beautifully, because we talked about this with In the Name of the King, and I got really pissed at that movie because I tried to show that fantasy can be better than In the Name of the King. It doesn't have to be In the Name of the King or Lord of the Rings. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what the idea of high fantasy is. It's either like shitty sci-fi movies or Lord of the Rings, and there's so much in the middle. And high fantasy can be done in such a beautiful and like this, in such a poetic way that doesn't have to be the 3-movie epic that Lord of the Rings is. It doesn't have to be like Black Death with Nicolas Cage.
Right. It reminded me of Macbeth, the 2015 Macbeth.
Yeah. I was saying earlier, this movie's just like Macbeth. I mean, of course, the Green Knight story is very much an allegory of Macbeth. You know, like they're very similar. Or Macbeth is an allegory of the Green Knight. I don't know, but like there's beats in these two poems that are too similar to be on like at least known of each other or something, or creative consciousness. I mean, I have no idea if this was before. Probably Shakespeare. Way before Shakespeare probably read this.
Shakespeare was well read enough to know that.
Dude, I don't know. Like
he would still have read this.
Like there's like 4 Romans. Like, come on.
It's like they would, people that were as well read as someone like William Shakespeare, or at least the people that were around him, would have known of a story like this. It all would go back to Chaucer, Old English before that, right? Like Beowulf.
Yeah.
Then Chaucer, and then. This is before Chaucer, I believe, too. Actually,
yeah, it's around the same time.
This is written in the 6th century, 6th or 7th century,
14th.
You know, I might have been wrong, because what I was thinking when I said that was that it takes place, and my brain just got confused.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was written 14th century, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know. It comes down to like, this type of story can be told so beautifully, and it doesn't have to be like lofty high fantasy that like is confusing or like cheesy or corny with bad CGI. Like the CGI Fox kind of got on my nerves, but that was really the only
that
CGI.
was the only like
that was the only point where I was like,
visually
just train a fox.
That was the only part. Same, where I was like, eh.
But when you look at the budget, you're like, okay.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, like...
I thought it looked good. I liked the fox.
No, he was...
How it's like maybe his mom.
The movements of the fox were very Uncanny Valley. Like...
It was like what they were going to do with the original Sonic.
Yeah, it just felt weird.
Before they had to reanimate it.
Yeah, it felt animated. The fox's movements were a little too fluid, and I don't know. He took me out of it a little bit, especially with such incredible practical effects. I mean, we watched this little clip of the director going over the first scene of the movie, and I mean, he even talks about like they used matte paintings. Like, who the fuck uses matte paintings in 2021? More
people than you'd think.
Like, I don't know. I don't really think in like a big time. Tell me right now, Jesse, what major AAA movie has used?
I don't know, because I don't like, that's not my world.
I mean, like,
but this isn't big budget, is my point. It's
Marvel,
15 million. It's not $200 million like Marvel movies are.
Exactly, but like, So are we doing matte paintings because of budgetary concerns? Because it didn't seem like that. It seemed like a matte painting.
No, I think it's because he really
art.
likes them and he likes film. You know, he points out how the old Star Wars movies did it, and he just likes that element of filmmaking more so than he does just like using a CGI background or something. Feels more tactile. It's just more in his wheelhouse. And my point with Macbeth, by the way, is just that it's a similar thing, not necessarily storytelling wise, although I'm not discounting that. I don't know well enough, but just to the point that it's like this epic poem that's presented in a way that's similar. You know, it's like you take this source material that's old and has this sort of thing going on, and you kind of make it fit what you want to do, make it kind of like darker and weirder and like just gorgeous. So it's more just like a comment on the filmmaking than anything.
Definitely. I mean, yeah.
I think that he, it's almost as if he had like it just lying around. I'm talking about Lowry now, the director.
Yeah.
If he was just like had the book lying around somewhere in his house and picked it up one day and like was like, I can make a movie out of this. And like Jeff was saying at the beginning, this idea of close reading where it's like you write down every time you react to a line, right? Emotionally. Like at the very beginning, the very first reading. You're just like you're just riffing off of the literature. You're not trying to find anything necessarily. Yeah. You're not trying to like make any statements or arguments. You're just purely reading through it and writing how you react. For some reason, I felt like a lot of the ways that he probably emotionally react when reading this story were then made into film, which is really cool about generally just about filmmaking, you know, is that you can take your feelings when you're reading something like this line by line and just be like, I want to project all of that onto the screen right now.
Yeah. Interpretation is just huge. Like you're allowed to interpret the medium any way you want, and that's so unique.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's an interpretation. It's a what do they call it? Like not spin-off world, alternate timeline kind of thing going
alternate
on.
Universe.
Alternate universe, yeah. Yep. It's like when people complain about the Lord of the Rings movies, which is my absolute least favorite cinema conversation to ever have. I will not engage with you if you're complaining about those movies. They didn't do this one thing. It's like, dude, come on. Come on now.
Oh, you mean like that was in like the book?
Yeah. It's like they didn't include this one detail.
They didn't include my favorite scene when he picks up the apple this way.
Yeah, this is our friend Jared to a T. But anyway, the point is like, what was my point? My point is like both versions can exist happily. And I think that's cool.
Well, both versions have to exist happily because, as I said earlier, you cannot put these poems onto film verbatim. Try doing the Iliad in a movie.
Try doing Lord of the Rings,
like in a good movie.
Book but Lord is of the Rings, unfilmable.
But Lord of the Rings is still a full story. That makes sense. A lot of these Homeric and these early stories, these oral legends, are so difficult to put into film because they're so eclectic. They're so specific for the time that they come in and the context that they're in that time. And to do this so masterfully, like The Green Knight, is such a testament to how someone cares so much about the source material.
They definitely didn't have it in their brains of like modern storytelling conventions or arcs. Definitely not. Like neither did Tolkien, to be fair, but definitely not Homer.
Yeah.
You know.
Now there was there was one scene I wanted to just talk about real quick was this idea of like him being given all of the tools he was needed to succeed and losing all of them immediately. I thought that was really interesting. He set off with like they take the time to show that everyone's sewing his armor and sewing his chainmail and the sash and pounding the gold thread into the sash and like all of these. And his face is washed by the king, and the king is God. The king is God's hand on the earth. and his face is washed by God, and he's prepared in the eyes of God. Like he's washed and anointed and oiled, and he's given everything in the Christian power to help him succeed against something as uncontrollable as the force of nature. And that's something so specific to the plot, and he loses all of this. He loses his clothes, he loses his sword, he loses the axe, everything right away. And it's just like
they start coming back to him though in weird times. Like the sash that she gives him near the end is the same sash, and you're like, what?
Is it? So I was reading about the sash in the poem. Apparently, the sash is not the same sash.
No, because there's no inaugural sash. So
okay, there we go.
The poem varies in many ways. Like I said earlier, it's a much more, I am Gawain, I am great knight, and he wins all the things except for the very last one. He doesn't give in to temptation. He doesn't get a hand job. At least it doesn't say so. The only thing he fails is in like wanting to not die, so he keeps the sash for himself and doesn't give it to Lord Bertilac vis-a-vis their wager. Yeah. That's the only way he fails. And at the end of the Green Knight does 3 swipes, misses him twice, and nicks him the last time, gives him a little scar because he failed in just one of the knightly virtues. Mm-hmm. That's a very different thing, and it goes into the ending of this movie, which is really interesting, and I wanted to ask you guys about this. So before jumping into like what does the ending mean, I have a question. Mm-hmm. Who is the Green Knight? Because what's her name? You were telling Winifred says a line to him that you can very easily skip over. She says, "The Green Knight is someone you know." And when he's bending down before the visions start, and it zooms in on the Green Knight's face, you see it shifting into all of these different faces. Almost like it reminded me of Mandy, weirdly, when she's looking into the cult leader's eyes. In a very different kind of scene, but... Yeah. Is the Green Knight everybody? Is that the thing?
I think that the Green Knight in this version of the story is, because I've heard people say that Sir Bertilac is the Green Knight.
Yes. This is important to state for context. In the poem, it is Lord Bertilac, and he's like, because you kept your chastity, you didn't bang my wife or whatever, I'm not killing you. But it was him. It was the Lord of the Castle that he spends like half of the story with.
Exactly. So in the movie, though, I kind of feel like the Green Knight is the representation of all of the people that he has betrayed to get to this point. All of the virtues that he has failed at are being flashed. You see Arthur for a minute, so he's failed his king. You see Essel, he failed his love. You see Lay, someone who he failed her test, like his mother. Like it flashes through all of these faces. And I kind of feel like it's just like this representation of like, you are being judged by everybody around you.
Yeah, I like that reading.
Yeah.
Jinx.
Yep.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. I mean, goddamn. Can we talk 2 seconds about the? I mean, I know we did already, but the Green Knight, man. I mean, the acting.
You talk about that costume.
Not only the costume, but the little time that he's on the screen is so powerful. Ralph Ineson has that voice, that deep gravel voice, like he did in The Vitch as the father. Yeah. And it's like that deep gravel that's so signature of him, and it just works so well for the Green Knight. It had this almost, now they flanged his voice a bit to give like a little bit of a supernatural tone,
but not too much.
Not too much. He has this deep guttural.
You could tell it was him. Yeah,
it's almost like the bowels of the earth are talking to you. Like it's like the representation of everything that nature is talking to you. And I don't know, I love that. I love that they made him into kind of like a satyr, or like like a type of mythical creature, instead of in the poem he's just like a dude in green armor. Yeah, he's just a dude. Mm-hmm. He's like a big dude. And so I like these additions that they gave. It gave the movie this feeling. I don't know. So to me, that's really something I just felt like was so needed to be
gave
mentioned.
it like a magical realism vibe that I think is cool. That you see in things like Pan's Labyrinth, you know, with the fawn and everything.
This is a way that this creature could exist.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's just really, really, really beautiful. And then the other thing I want to mention is A24. Again, could be just Lowry. I mean, he's a great cinematographer, but they do something in this movie that they did in Midsommar and that they did in Hereditary, which was they spin the camera to show that the world is being turned upside down. That reality is being turned on its head. They did it in Midsommar when they're driving in to the area. The camera flips and goes upside down, and the car is driving on the what would be like the ceiling and everything. The grass is below, and then it slowly turns back to go like, "Hey, we're now in a new reality." And this movie does that as well. About midway through, I think it's like right before or maybe it's right after the giant scene. I don't know if it's before or after, but the camera.
I think it's directly after that.
The camera takes this huge spin. This long
and it's gorgeous.
And then
it disorients you.
Yeah, and then it's back, and it's almost like we've now entered like the world of the Green Knight, if that makes any sense. Like he is no longer in Camelot, which is already a fictional place.
Yeah, that was a great shot.
Yeah,
the filmmaking in general is fantastic. Alex, did we jump over you? I have this continuing like fear because Alex's cadence is so much shorter, or so much like you have so much more pause in your cadence than us that I think like we think you're done talking and you're not, and we just jump all over you.
Oh no, you're good. That's fine.
Okay.
It has not happened recently. Okay. I kind of like me trailing off and one of you guys picking up the rest of like my idea, because sometimes it starts to get like too heavy at the end, and I'm like, what the fuck am I even saying?
Right. I get that so much, dude. I'm like, when I'm like halfway through like like a spiel, and
but
I'm
you'll
like,
keep going.
Like, I'll just finish it up.
Like motor mouth.
I'll finish it up. I don't give a fuck. I'm not gonna just trail off.
So like, speaking about the end here, well, like if you had to choose, and you don't have to, but if you had to, right? I know that's wow, play into the fucking the sidelines there. That was terrible. If you had to choose like an interpretation of the ending, whether he gets his head cut off or not, what do you choose and why? Because it is left open.
Did you guys see the after credit scene?
I did.
Okay. Oh, no. Yeah. What is it?
It's very short. It's just a small girl sitting on the floor, and she picks up the king's crown and she puts it on her head.
So it's like maybe his daughter kind of thing?
Yeah,
okay.
It's like kind of like I think it really speaks to this whole idea that you were talking about of like women holding a higher role in this movie than they would have originally held in the play. Is like, well, maybe that is what was needed, was to like root out this kind of like patriarchy and start anew.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love the lingering question of Gawain's death. My interpretation of it, trying to divorce it from the fact that he's spared in the poem, because that's its own thing. My interpretation was that the Green Knight spares him as he's learned to be a knight, basically. And when he says, "Off with your head," in that sly tone of voice, he draws a symbolic line with his finger across Gawain's neck. And so it's like, I don't know, maybe that's like just him saying like, you've succeeded. But I do know that David Lowery originally had a darker, less interpretive ending. So my other reading is like hinges on a conversation Gawain has with Bertilac about honor. How you go to this, you go do this one thing, and boom, you're changed. And you get to go live this beautiful life as an honorable knight forevermore. And like in this reading where the knight does indeed decapitate Gawain, I think you see the futility of Gawain's philosophy. It seems to say that like a man cannot change by one small gesture. Maybe he meets death with some measure of dignity or honor, but he still dies. And he still was who he was all the way through life. And Gawain was a pretty shit like knight. I mean, we've talked about he wasn't knight. But I don't know. Those are two ways you can take it.
Yeah, I can't buy in to that second reading, unfortunately, or your first reading. To me, it's clear as crystal that Gawain is killed.
Yeah, I think he gets his head
cut
off.
I don't even think there's any room for interpretation. I do think that the final line that the Green Knight says was a little... I liked
playful.
your reading because it made it a little less corny to me. Like, his final line, I was like, that was a little, like, light for, like, this end.
Little, like, medieval timesy, like,
yeah,
fantasy.
it was a little, like, it was a little
off
corny.
with your head.
Now off with his head, you know? And so, like, your reading makes that line make a lot more sense.
And that's 100% in my reading, but, like, what does it do for the story in your guys' eyes if he does get his head cut off?
So...
Yeah, go ahead, Alex, please.
He's failed this whole time, right? The one time he succeeds is when he puts his head down and realizes that, wow, I'm a bad knight. Like, I'm a bad person, I guess. I don't want to go that far and say he's like a bad person or whatever. But yeah, he like finally accepts in that moment, like, okay, this is what I have to do. Or I can live that life that I saw in the vision, right? Which, I don't know. I don't know if, like, they're giving him a way out or something like that. But basically the way I see this story now that we've talked about it is throughout the Green Knight, the written story, you see how this man is a hero and becomes a hero. How the main character does what he needs to do. Sometimes there are journeys, I feel, that illuminate that you are a villain or that you are just not a good person. And when you come to the realization at the end, he did like the only right thing in taking the axe. Mm-hmm. So I do think that he got his head cut off and that he dies at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff?
Yep. Man, you know, it's a big question, but I think really the main points to look at is that Gawain... We're trying to, the original poem, it's twofold. You know, it's telling the story of a man, like what it takes to be a good man, but also how does a good man be good in a world that is deteriorating? And I feel like that idea was then flipped and then put into this version of Gawain's character of he's the deteriorating version of chivalry. He is what chivalry has become, is this lofty legends, the way he says when he looks amongst all the knights. No, these are men who have given their life for their country and everything they have. They're not legends. They may be legendary, but they're not these lofty figures that you look at them with. That is a child's view of men who have given their life for their king. And so he always has this childish idea of what it means to be a knight, and he fails at every turn to be a knight. And at the end, he turns and he puts his head down and he does the one thing that a knight is supposed to do above all, that is honor your word.
Yeah.
Gawain gave his word that he would finish the game. He would allow him to hit him with the second strike. That is why when he runs away in his initial vision, to me, that's why he's cursed. All that shit like, that he failed at before that, fuck all that. Yeah. He's cursed because he stood in the face of death and honor and his word and he ran. Yeah. And that is just so the opposite of what a knight does.
But he didn't, right?
No, that's the thing.
He thinks about him.
But that's the thing. He doesn't. And that is what, in that moment, is his one. And the knight goes down and he gets on one knee and he says, he shows that he's proud of him. That he calls him brave knight. He's the only time that Gawain is referred to as a knight.
He calls him little knight or something like that.
I think he just says brave knight. I think he says something like something like along the lines of good job, but not good job.
David Lowery would fucking love this, by the way. I watched a bunch of interviews with him, and he's just like, he seems like really genuine and excited to like see what people get out of this. I don't know. I think he would love this conversation.
Tweet it at him. But no, it's just the ending. Yeah, Gawain dies because he refused to uphold the highest tenet of knighthood, which is your word. Your word in this time is.
See, I think he survives because he does obtain it at the end, and that's.
But he doesn't. I think he still fails at everything. Just because you decide at the last minute that you want to go ahead, it's like an allegory to the Christian redemption and the redemption through the blood of Christ. Like, as long as you do what is required of you of the church, you are forgiven for all your sins. Nature doesn't fucking work that way. It doesn't matter. You failed all of the tasks that were brought in front of you. You may have succeeded in this one time, but that doesn't mean that nature is going to take any pity on you at all. So he kneels down, he commends him for being brave, and then he cuts his fucking head off because that is what he's supposed to do.
We don't know. That's a very valid reading. I think most of the analysis that I read tended to think that he was alive. So, I mean, like I said, I love that it is as interpretive as it is, and that they're equally valid as long as you can, back up your point with some kind of substance, which I believe we've all done.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think to a pretty heavy degree here.
Yeah, man, fucking great movie.
Yeah,
don't
really
watch
good,
it if you want. If you want, I don't know, what's a movie what's like a dumb version of this?
I mean, so many
In the Name of the King.
Go onto Netflix's fantasy section.
Imagine.
And there you go.
Imagine Michael Douglas's character from Falling Down going on this journey instead.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of people just rob someone? What kind of people just take someone's axe? I mean, this is America. I pay my taxes. You take my axe.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Good shit. Well, yeah, watch The Green Knight. If you want a beautiful movie that's intelligent, but you kind of have to work at it, I would say watch it. Maybe not if you want it to just be spoon-fed to you.
Yeah, watch it like surround sound, high fidelity, or on some like dank headphones.
Exactly.
Maybe subtitles will help if you have a hard time with movies dense like this.
Yeah, and like I said, I watched it twice and was just as enamored the second time, if not more so. Just like seeing all these little elements that I failed to see. There's so many little symbols going on in the frame where you're like, oh, what's that? You want to pause it and check it out.
Oh yeah,
like, where else does this show up?
I mean,
there are so many other things in this movie, by the way, that we have not talked about.
I was just about to say the costumes, bro. I mean, we could even go into just the costumes.
I just meant like weird metaphors.
Oh,
and
sure.
Like how characters are echoes of each other. And
there's going to be so many. If people actually commented on our videos, there would be many comments like, oh, well, actually, you missed this and this line, which please comment below if we missed anything. I'd love to debate this movie and interpretations of it. If you have a different interpretation of it, let us know, and I would love to talk about it.
Yeah, if you think it sucked, especially.
Oh, dude, yeah. If you think it sucked, please comment that it sucks.
Please leave a message that just doesn't say anything except this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Just say that. And I will respect you.
I will respect you. All right, well.
Yeah. Before we wrap up today, we got any not even recommendations, but things we watched. What do we got?
I'm going to pass this off to you two media nerds.
Yeah, well, okay. Speaking of, to tie it back to the beginning of the podcast, I was talking about a zombie movie with Bill Murray in it. I watched another zombie movie with Bill Murray in it that I liked way, way more. It's called The Dead Don't Die. Came out 2020, directed by Jim Jarmusch. And it stars Bill Murray and Adam Driver. And they're like small-town cops who have to deal with a zombie apocalypse kind of deal. And the movie is so boring and dry, like boring in a great way where it's like super flat. You know, the line deliveries are really flat. It has this really curious energy to it, to where I was giggling the entire time. And it's a very specific tone. Like I say, it's super understated and comedic in like a weird sense. It's definitely not the high energy kind of blah comedy you get in something like Zombieland. It's much more dry than that. And it's a movie that general audiences, for one, did not like, which is not surprising. But critics also didn't seem to like it too much either. And I do see a lot of flaws in it, which I won't get into for the sake of brevity. But I was giggling the entire time. And I think if you like our podcast, you would probably think it's pretty funny. And I recommend it.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. Can you say the director's name one more time?
Jim Jarmusch.
Okay, Jar Jar Binks. Sure, okay. Fucking,
yeah.
What fucking name is that? Change it, bro. Just change it.
He's a pretty crazy looking dude.
I mean, with a name like Jarmusch, yeah, you probably are pretty crazy.
He's a crazy filmmaker. He made another really great movie called Dead Man with Johnny Depp in '95.
Oh, he did
that? He does a lot of weird movies. Oh. He did Only Lovers Left Alive, sort of vampire movie that came out a few years ago.
I've never heard of none of these.
Yeah, check him out as a director as well. Yeah, he's interesting.
Sounds cool.
Well, I've seen this movie plenty of times that I'm about to recommend, and it just was on TV the other day while I was actually flipping through like normal cable.
What the fuck kind of grandpa are you?
Dude, I know. I know.
What are you talking about?
Like you're literally speaking Japanese right now, dude.
I watch Jeopardy, so I record it every night.
Shut up, bro, dude. I mean, come on. You just get the hearing aid already.
I know.
Jesus. All right, sorry.
That was a joke, right?
I want to plug Werther's Originals caramels. They're amazing.
Not sponsored. No, not sponsored.
It wasn't a joke?
No, dude, this dude records Jeopardy. I heard the sincerity in his voice.
What the fuck?
So weird. You're such a weird human, dude.
So I watched Milk.
Oh,
which is a movie by Gus Van Sant. Yeah, it's a great movie.
Amazing.
I hadn't watched it in a long time.
I haven't seen Milk. I know what it is though.
What?
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen it.
I mean, please do yourself a favor.
Yeah, Sean Penn is gay mayor kind of thing.
Sean Penn,
he's like a city
Harvey Milk
councilman. Yeah. Yes, the first openly gay politician, I believe, in the United States. Yeah, it's a great movie. The cast is really good. I mean, Sean Penn won an Oscar for it, so I don't need to tell you about his acting performance. James Franco's in it. Trigger warning if anyone.
Oh yeah, he's getting canceled big time right now.
Is he? I didn't know that.
He's fucking out, dude. He is out. He's done.
He is toast.
He's done.
Oh shit. But yeah, it's a beautiful movie. I think Gus Van Sant is one of the better directors out there. I like his stuff, so
I love him in he did that cameo in Jay and Silent Bob. That was amazing. Gus, is this all right, Gus? And he's just like counting money. And he just looks up and he's like, yeah. And he just like waves them away with a handful of money.
Yeah.
He made one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. Well, in a sense, but it's called Jerry with a G, and it just has Casey Affleck and Matt Damon roaming around in a desert for an hour and a half, and it's like incredibly boring, but somehow really compelling.
Yeah, he's good at that stuff, right? And like, I don't know, like Paris, Texas, I could have seen him making a movie like that. Like, he just, I don't know.
His most famous one is like Good Will Hunting, right?
Yeah, that one, and probably, I mean, Last Days is big.
Oh, that's the
My Own Private Idaho.
Last Days is the thing about Kurt Cobain's like last couple days. Yeah. That's an interesting movie. Yeah. I don't know how popular it is, but I do like that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, Finding Forrester. Anyway. Jefferson Twilight Vampire Hunter. You got one?
I think. All right. Quick little sidebar. Did I talk about The Matrix last episode?
No.
Okay. Cool.
No. You told me you were going to on this one.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. I'm losing my mind. All right, and action. So yeah, I've been rewatching the Matrix trilogy actually, in preparation for our eventual coverage of the just announced and freshly trailered Matrix 4 that we've all known is going to be coming out for a while.
We'll definitely do that one.
So we'll definitely cover that one regardless of how good or potentially horrible it is. Yeah. I'm leaning towards the latter. But yeah, I've been rewatching the original Matrix movies. I just finished the last one, the third one, I think like this morning or something. I don't know. All the days blend together nowadays. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic universe when you delve into the lore that the animated world, like Animatrix and everything, created for it.
Yes.
The lore of the Matrix is just great once you have all the context where all the agents come from, the bigger picture behind Zion and all that. But as films go, Jesus Christ, dude. Like, the second and third one could not be more fucking annoying and just pedantic. And, like, why, with this horribly forced love story, like, it feels so forced. They don't feel like real people, Trinity and Neo. Like, they don't feel like two people who are actually in love. They feel like a very movie, like, oh God, look, we're just so fucking passionate, and just all we want to do is just touch each other. And it's just like, God.
I feel that way about Alex most of the time.
I don't know. But then I will say that the second and third ones, if you removed the shit ass ham-fisted love story from The Matrix entirely, even the first one, don't care. You have some really great themes in the second and third movies that just don't get to shine because of how just god awful the storytelling. I mean, the Merovingian, the idea that he is like this, I don't know. There's so many great ideas about the first and second iteration, the Nightmare Matrix, where all monsters that we talk about in mythology come from, and all that kind of cool stuff like that got left to the wayside or just slightly mentioned because we just had to like show Keanu Reeves kissing this actress again.
Dude, Jeff, I love this difference between us because like you and I are complete opposite in the fact that like you're this lore nerd. You're like, but they get so much better if you look at the thing, and I'm like, no, just it's like the movie is its thing. And that's what it is, and it's terrible.
I just
like
can't.
Don't get me wrong. I love the first one. The second one has a few interesting things. The third one is fucking dog shit. But yeah,
I love lore. I love the world. Like if you give me a good world, I can forgive bad interpretations.
I like lore in games. I like lore that's presented in the movies, but I'm not gonna like go out and read Star Wars.
See, I'm a
novels.
wiki hound. Like that's how I go to bed. Like I go to bed every night. I pick a different lore that I love, and I just dive into its wiki and look up all the characters and all the backstories, and then that's how I go to bed every night. So it's like, yeah, that's the Matrix.
You gotta write some shit, man. Write your own lore-verse.
I have an entire dwarven culture that has a fully realized language.
You do? You gotta write some stories based on that shit.
Yeah, nah. Nothing I write is worth anything like that. Any kind of time invested.
Hey, that was unprofessional. Who had their phone going?
Me. Yep, that was 100% me.
I was gonna say I
was figuring we were gonna edit out like this whole kind of like self fucking hatred section of the podcast anyway.
No.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a long one. It's like an hour and 40.
Yeah. Anyway, I've been watching the Matrix movies in preparation. Do I recommend them? Fuck no. But I mean, that's what I was watching. So there you go.
Watch the first one. Just pretend. I guess.
I
don't know.
Don't.
No, the first one's fantastic.
Like, but don't, because you know the other ones exist. You know, and it's just
that's fine. You can pretend that they don't.
I guess it just feels like a story half finished.
I don't know. Oh, we'll leave it there. I don't know. That's a whole.
We won't just leave it there. We'll bring it back for when the Matrix 4 happens.
Right. Oh my God. It'll be like 3 hours.
One last little Green Knight thing. I'm looking through the IMDb, and like under storyline, there's all the tags that people give the movie to like help with the search. And one of the tags is gay kiss, which I just fucking love so much. That one man on man. There's one man on man kiss, and it's on the cheek in the whole movie.
No, I kisses him on the mouth.
And somebody has to be like, I gotta make sure people know there's a gay kiss in this. Jesus.
That's fucking hilarious.
People. Anywho.
Let's wrap it. We're wrapping it. We'll be back. We'll be back to talk about Amadeus.
Yeah, that's right.
Amadeus.
Speaking of music.
Yep. More high-level, lofty art shit. Get ready.
Composers. And then I'll bring it down for the next one.
Thanks.
I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I really don't. It might be more lofty artistic bullshit. We'll have to see. Been a while. All right, we're out of here. Fucking peace. Now our podcast is done, and we have to run. We know it is sad, but we had so much fun. Don't be bereft, Jesse, Alex, and Jeff. We'll be back real soon. The Reel Weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Bo 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 bo.